You can hear the wind before you see the canyon. It hums through the red rocks like a voice that's been waiting for someone to listen. The road narrows, curls downward, and vanishes into a world of sandstone and sunlight. For a long while, there's nothing but the whisper of tires on gravel and the steady beat of your heart. Then the canyon opens before you, wide and golden, bathed in afternoon light. And it feels less like arriving and more like remembering. As if some part of you has been here before. The first thing I notice when I step out of the car is the silence. It isn't empty, it's layered. There's the faint sigh of the wind tracing the cliffs, the chirp of something small hiding in the brush, the faraway rhythm of water dripping somewhere deep in the stone. The desert doesn't speak loudly. It just waits until you're quiet enough to hear it. The lodge stands a short walk from the road, an old adobe structure the color of sun-baked clay. It was built in the 1940s, I'd read, as a rest stop for artists traveling between Santa Fe and Sedona, a place for painters to chase the light and for sculptors to listen to the wind shape the stone. Now it's being restored, and that's what brought me here. When I push open the heavy wooden door, it sighs against the hinges, like it's exhaling after a long sleep. Inside, the air is cool, filled with the scent of cedar and dust. Sunlight filters through square windows, casting pale gold rectangles on the floor. A fan turns lazily from the ceiling, its creak rhythmic and oddly soothing. I drop my bag beside a weathered armchair and stand still for a moment. My life in the city, the noise, the screens, the constant clockwork of obligation, feels far away, almost fictional. Here, there are no clocks, only light moving across the walls. The caretaker, an older woman named May, greets me with a nod from the doorway. She's small, dressed in faded denim, her hair silver and tied back. "Long drive?" she asks, her voice slow, as though shaped by years of desert air. 8 hours, I say. But it doesn't feel like I'm tired. Just quiet. She smiles at that. That's what this place does. The canyon doesn't talk much, but it listens better than most. Outside, the light is turning amber, deepening toward dusk. May tells me dinner will be simple, bean stew and cornbread, and that the generator cuts off at 10 when the stars come out. After that, she says, you sleep with the sound of the wind. It's the best kind of lullaby. I step outside again, into the amber hush. The air smells faintly of sage and cooling stone. The canyon walls glow like embers fading into night. I take a deep breath. Slow and full, feeling the quiet settle into me. And for the first time in years, my mind stops reaching forward. It just rests. The sky is a painting in slow motion, orange giving way to pink, pink dissolving into violet. The cliffs seem to hold on to the last of the light, as though reluctant to let it go. From the porch of the lodge, I can see the valley below, where the river curves like a dark ribbon between the rocks. May joins me with 2 steaming mugs. The smell of coffee, earthy, rich, mingles with the scent of sagebrush. Locals call this hour the hush, she says, handing me a mug. Everything's alive, but nothing moves. Even the wind takes a rest. We sit side by side on the steps. She hums softly under her breath, a tune without words, almost like a lullaby. The sound carries just far enough to mix with the low hum of crickets waking in the grass. After a while, she says, "You came to work on the restoration, right?" I nod. "Mostly to document the architecture. I'm an architect, or I used to be." Her eyes narrow slightly, though not unkindly. "Used to?" I stopped building things after my father passed. He taught me how to draw lines that could stand against wind and rain. When he was gone, the lines didn't make sense anymore. May studies me for a long time, her gaze calm, the way the desert looks at you. Never hurried, never judging. "Maybe you'll find your lines again here," she says simply. "The canyon keeps old stories. It's patient about telling them. A coyote howls in the distance. One long, bending note. Then another answers. The sound moves through the air like a thread being pulled between hills. I sip my coffee slowly, the warmth grounding me in the growing cool. May rises. "Lights go out soon. Stars'll come out quick. You'll see." She nods toward the narrow trail leading beyond the lodge. "There's a lookout half a mile that way. Go after dark if you're up for it. You'll hear the canyon breathing." After she leaves, I linger on the porch, watching the last stripe of gold vanish from the horizon. The wind returns in soft gusts, brushing over the roof, whispering through the dry grass. When the generator hums to a stop, the silence deepens until I can hear my own heartbeat. I take May's advice. With a flashlight and a blanket over my shoulders, I follow the narrow trail toward the overlook. Each step crunches softly on gravel. The night air is cool and smells faintly of juniper and dust. When I reach the edge, the world unfolds around me, endless, open, and impossibly still. The Milky Way stretches overhead like spilled salt across black velvet. I sit down on a flat rock and turn off the flashlight. The canyon hums below. Not a sound I can name, but a vibration that feels like it's coming from inside the earth itself. I close my eyes. For a moment, it feels like the canyon is breathing with me. I wake before the generator hums to life, the sky just beginning to glow beyond the windows. The quiet is perfect, the kind that makes you listen not for noise but for texture. You can hear the faint shifting of the wind through the canyon grass, the slow creak of the lodge's wooden beams adjusting to the day. May's already up, of course. I find her in the kitchen with a pot of oatmeal bubbling on a small gas burner. "Sleep all right?" she asks without turning around. "I think so," I say. It's strange. I can't remember falling asleep. One moment I was looking at the stars, and the next, the sky was changing color. "That's a good kind of sleep," she replies with a smile. "Means the place accepted you." She pours black coffee into a metal cup and slides it toward me. I take a sip and watch the light crawl slowly across the floorboards. After breakfast, I decide to explore the trail that winds deeper into the canyon. May hands me a small canteen and a warning: follow the sound of the river, not the wind. The wind'll trick you. The river never lies. The trail begins just past the lodge, a narrow dirt path winding between clusters of sage and red rock. As I walk, the canyon opens like a slow breath. The walls rise higher, streaked with mineral veins and petroglyphs that seem to shimmer in the morning light. I stop to study them: spirals, animals, hands pressed into the rock. The marks are weathered but alive, carved hundreds, maybe thousands of years ago. I trace one of the spirals with my fingertip. The stone is cool and slightly damp. I can almost feel the hand that made it, a person standing here long before me, carving their story into the canyon's ribs. A small lizard darts across my shoe, startling me into a laugh. Its skin glints like bronze as it disappears under a rock. The sound of water grows stronger the farther I walk, a hidden stream murmuring at the canyon's base. When I reach it, I sit down on a smooth boulder and take a long drink from the canteen. The water's reflection dances on the underside of the rocks, turning them into ripples of gold. There's a peace here that doesn't feel passive. It feels ancient. Like the world was built to rest, and humans simply forgot how. I take out my sketchbook, something I haven't opened in months, and begin to draw. Not buildings, not blueprints, just the shapes of the rocks, the way the light bends between them. The pencil moves easily, as if the canyon itself is guiding my hand. After a while, I hear footsteps behind me, slow, unhurried. I turn and see a man approaching, tall, wearing a wide-brimmed hat and carrying a walking stick carved from driftwood. "Morning," he says with a grin. "Didn't think anyone else came down this far." "I'm staying up at May's lodge," I reply. "Couldn't resist seeing where the path led." He nods, eyes scanning the petroglyphs. "Ah, you found the stories. They say the canyon keeps them alive, you know. Every time someone notices, the old ones breathe a little easier." He tips his hat and continues down the path, leaving only the sound of his boots and the steady whisper of the wind.
I watch him go, wondering whether he meant the old ones as a metaphor, or something else entirely. Either way, I understand the feeling. Here, everything, even the stones, feels awake. The trail curved deeper into the canyon until the sound of rushing water became a steady, low heartbeat beneath everything else. I followed it until the walls widened again, opening into a shallow basin where the stream spread into a series of glassy pools. The man from earlier, the one with the wide-brimmed hat, was there. He'd taken off his boots and rolled up his sleeves, standing ankle-deep in the water, stacking smooth stones into a small, balanced tower. The morning light touched the ripples, painting them in bronze and pale blue. He looked up when he saw me and smiled. Didn't expect company. But it's good to share the silence once in a while. I stepped closer, careful not to disturb the water too much. "It's beautiful here," I said quietly. "Feels untouched," he nodded. "That's because it remembers before there was touching." He placed another stone on his tower, the balance so precise it looked impossible. These walls, they've seen every storm, every drought, every hand that's tried to shape them. And still they stand like this. I watched him work in silence. Each movement was patient, almost ritualistic. "Do you live out here?" I asked after a while. He smiled without looking up. "Sometimes. I guide people through the canyon now and then." "Help them listen to what?" "The parts of themselves they've forgotten how to hear." He glanced at me then, eyes reflecting the same soft shimmer as the stream. There was no judgment in his expression, only recognition, as if he knew what I was carrying even before I said it. I sat on a nearby rock, watching as he finished the small tower. It leaned slightly but didn't fall. The water flowed around it, calm and sure. He stepped back and nodded, satisfied. "See? That's all we're meant to do. Leave something balanced behind." We sat there for a long time, not talking. The wind passed through the canyon like a whisper, and the surface of the water flickered with small waves that looked like breaths. When I finally spoke, my voice sounded different. Slower, steadier. "You think the people who carved those symbols on the walls, they were doing the same thing?" "Trying to balance something?" "Maybe," he said. "Maybe they were trying to talk to time. Tell it that they were here, that they listened." The sun had climbed higher now, setting fire to the cliffs. The man bent, cupped water in his hands, and let it fall over the tower. It glistened for a moment, then dried almost instantly in the heat. When I looked up again, he was walking away down the trail, boots in hand, his figure shrinking against the canyon light. I sat there alone beside the water, watching the little tower hold steady against the current. And, for the first time in a long while, I didn't feel like rushing anywhere. The canyon didn't ask for effort, only presence. By the time I returned to the lodge, dusk was already sinking into the canyon. The air had cooled, and the shadows from the cliffs stretched long and violet across the sand. May had lit a few lanterns along the porch. Their soft glow flickered against the adobe walls like small, steady heartbeats. Inside, the scent of stew filled the kitchen. Beans, roasted corn, a hint of cumin. I hadn't realized how hungry I was until that moment. May turned from the stove, wiping her hands on a towel. "You found the river, didn't you?" she said, smiling before I could answer. "You've got that look." "What look is that?" "The kind people get when the canyon starts talking to them." We ate at the small wooden table by the window. Outside, the sky was deepening toward indigo. The lantern light caught the curve of May's hands as she spoke. She told me stories about the canyon, the old tribes who lived here, the artists who'd come in the 40s, the storms that changed the shape of the rocks but never their soul. When she talked about the past, she did it the way one might speak of living friends, with affection, not nostalgia. After dinner, she poured tea made from wild desert mint and honey. The warmth of it spread through me until I felt as if I were sinking into the chair. The hum of insects outside was rhythmic, meditative, blending with the soft creak of the ceiling fan. "Do you ever get tired of the quiet out here?" I asked. May chuckled. "Oh, it's not quiet, not really. You just learn to hear what most people miss. The river beneath the rock, the lizards brushing past the walls, the stars when they rise, and they make a sound too. If you're patient." I smiled, half thinking she was teasing. But her tone was too sincere to doubt. When the generator finally cut out, the lodge fell into gentle darkness. The only light came from the moon spilling through the window, pale and silver. I thanked May for the meal, and she nodded toward the door. "Go walk a bit before bed," she said. "The canyon's best songs are sung after dark." Outside, the air was cool enough that I could see my breath. The sky was wide and brilliant, scattered with stars, so sharp they looked carved. The Milky Way arched across the canyon like a river of its own. I walked a little way down the path, just enough to leave the light of the lodge behind. The silence out there was deeper than any I'd known, but it wasn't empty. It was full, layered with sound I couldn't quite name. The distant rush of air, a faint rustle, something that almost resembled a heartbeat beneath it all. When I closed my eyes, I could almost imagine the petroglyphs breathing along the canyon walls, the carved hands pressed into the stone, glowing softly under the stars. The air carried that same lavender-tinged scent of sage and dust. I sat on a rock, wrapped the blanket tighter around my shoulders, and let the night hold me. Time loosened its grip. Thought drifted away. The canyon didn't demand silence. It simply taught it. Morning came warm and gold, the light already bright enough to turn the canyon walls into living fire. The air smelled faintly of wet stone. There must have been rain somewhere in the night, though I hadn't heard it. The ground shimmered with thin mirrors of dew, and everything, even the dust, seemed clean. May was sitting outside when I emerged, sharpening a pencil with a pocket knife and sketching in a notebook that looked older than the lodge itself. She didn't look up as she spoke. "You were out late," she said, her tone gentle, like an observation rather than a reprimand. "Couldn't sleep," I replied. "The stars were too loud." That earned a chuckle. "Good. Means you're finally listening." I told her about the man by the river, how he'd built the stone tower, how he spoke of balance and old stories. May nodded slowly. "That'd be Jonah. He comes and goes. Doesn't live anywhere, but the canyon keeps him. Is he a guide?" "Something like that," she said. "He helps people find what they didn't know they lost." After breakfast, I decided to head back toward the river. The canyon felt different now, awake in a brighter, more playful way. The breeze carried specks of sand that glittered like gold dust in the sunlight. When I reached the basin, Jonah wasn't there. The tower he'd built still stood, though one of the smaller stones had fallen, lying half submerged in the stream. I crouched down, balancing it back into place. It steadied easily, as if it wanted to return. I noticed something then, a narrow path behind a cluster of boulders, half hidden by sagebrush. It wasn't part of the main trail, but curiosity got the better of me. I followed it carefully, the path twisting between rocks until it opened into a shallow alcove carved into the canyon wall. Inside, the air was cool and still. My footsteps echoed softly on stone. Faint drawings lined the walls, faded but intact, figures of animals, spirals, hands reaching toward the sky. But one carving stood apart, a sun, its rays etched with such precision that they caught the light and seemed to glow. I reached out and traced it lightly with my fingertips. The stone was warm, even in the shade. For a moment I could almost feel a pulse beneath it. Slow, steady, ancient. In the quiet, I thought I heard something. Not words exactly, more like rhythm. The same low hum I'd heard the first night when I sat under the stars. Only now it came from inside the stone itself, vibrating up through my palm into my chest. It wasn't frightening. It felt familiar, like a song I'd known in another life. I stood there a long time, breathing with it. When I finally stepped back into the sunlight, the world outside felt brighter, sharper. Every sound, the wind, the rustle of dry grass, even the murmur of the river, carried a kind of music I hadn't noticed before. May's words returned to me. The canyon doesn't talk much, but it listens better than most, maybe, I thought. The canyon listens because it remembers, and maybe, when we finally get quiet enough, it lets us remember too. By late afternoon, the light began to change. The warmth that had shimmered on the rocks since morning faded into something softer, cooler. The air grew thick with the scent of ozone, and a low rumble rolled across the sky like distant drums. It was rare, May had said, for rain to fall this time of year, but the desert always seemed to keep a few secrets ready. I sat on the porch steps as the first drops began to fall, slow and hesitant, like the start of a forgotten melody. The rain darkened the canyon walls to deep copper and rust. Dust turned to earth, the air suddenly alive with the smell of clay and sagebrush. The sound was hypnotic. Not the harsh crash of storms I knew from the city, but a steady whisper, rhythmic and patient, like water speaking to stone. May joined me, carrying 2 mugs of tea. We sat in silence for a long while, listening to the rain weave its own song across the desert. "You ever notice," she said finally, "how rain in the canyon never feels like it's falling from the sky? It feels like it's coming up from the ground, like the land itself is remembering how to breathe." I smiled. "That's exactly how it feels." She took a slow sip of her tea. "The people who carved those petroglyphs, they believed storms were the canyon's way of cleansing old thoughts. Each drop carried memory from one age to another." I let the thoughts sink in, watching the rain gather in thin streams along the path. They trickled down toward the river, joining into silver ribbons that glinted in the dim light. After a while, May stood, tightening the shawl around her shoulders. "You should see the carvings after the rain. The water wakes the stone. It brings out what's been sleeping." When she went back inside, I stayed. The rain slowed to a drizzle, soft and uneven. I followed the sound toward the river, stepping carefully over wet earth and slick rocks. The air was cool and damp, carrying the faint sweetness of wildflowers that had opened in the storm's passing. When I reached the alcove where I'd found the carvings, I saw it immediately. The change May had meant. The drawings shimmered with moisture, each line darkened, vivid, alive. The figures looked as if they were moving. The hands reaching upward seemed to stretch a little farther. The spirals gleamed like water circling itself. And the carved sun, the one I had touched, glowed as if lit from within. Drops of rain still clung to the grooves, catching the last of the twilight. I brushed a fingertip along one of the rays. The water there was warm, impossibly warm. And when I pulled my hand away, the warmth lingered on my skin. The hum returned, faint but certain. I stood there listening, heart steady with it. The rhythm was the same as the night's first rain, the same as the wind's voice through the canyon, the same pulse I'd felt beneath my feet since arriving. It wasn't just the sound of the land, it was the sound of continuity, of all things connected and alive. And in that moment, I realized I wasn't simply standing in a canyon. I was standing inside a memory vast enough to hold every story ever whispered to stone. By evening, the storm had drifted east. The air shimmered with that strange, hollow stillness that comes after rain, the world holding its breath between endings and beginnings. Every surface gleamed, the cliffs, the stones, even the branches of the sparse desert trees. The light caught everything and turned it liquid. I made my way back toward the lodge as the sun began to sink. May was nowhere to be seen, but the front door was open, the lanterns already lit. Inside, I found a small note on the kitchen table written in her firm, looping handwriting, "Go back to where the river turns." The light will do the rest. No explanation, no signature. Just that. I folded the note into my pocket and headed back out. The sun was low, brushing the edges of the canyon with gold. The trail down to the river glowed, every puddle catching a sliver of sky. When I reached the turn May had mentioned, where the stream curved around a cluster of boulders, the world was silent. The light had changed again, softer now, touched with amber and rose. It poured down the canyon walls like honey, filling the carved grooves of the ancient drawings until they gleamed like fire. I stood in that glow, not moving, not even breathing for a moment. The warmth of it soaked into my skin. I could almost see the air ripple, as if the canyon itself were exhaling after a long, long wait. And then, just faintly, I heard humming. It wasn't wind this time. It was human, deep, slow, and perfectly in rhythm with the turning of the light. I turned, and Jonah was there, sitting cross-legged near the water's edge, his hat set beside him. He was watching the sunset like a man reading a familiar page. "You got May's note?" he said without looking up. "I did," I answered. "She said the light would do the rest." "What did she mean?" Jonah smiled, eyes still on the sky. "It means stop asking. Just look." So I did. The last rays of the sun reached the carved sun in the rock, igniting it. Not metaphorically, but truly. The reflection from the water hit it just right, and for one impossible instant, the whole carving blazed. It was so bright I had to squint, but it didn't hurt to look. It felt peaceful, like the light wasn't coming from outside, but from within. Jonah's voice was quiet beside me. "They carved it here because this is where the sun sets every spring equinox. It's an old marker, but it's also something more. It reminds the canyon that light always returns." The glow softened, then faded with the sinking sun until only the after-image remained, a gentle warmth on my face, like the lingering touch of a hand. We stayed there until the first stars appeared. Neither of us spoke again. When I finally turned back toward the lodge, Jonah was still sitting there, humming softly to himself. As I climbed the path, the light from the rising moon brushed the canyon walls silver, outlining every line and curve like a memory being redrawn. And, for the first time in years, I didn't feel like a visitor anywhere, not even in my own skin.